Coming up today, ending weeks and weeks of wrangling, Korea's parliament approves a bill to overhaul the nation's budget-sucking pension system for public sector employees. As Korea reels from the revelation that the US government sent a live anthrax sample to an American airbase in Korea, it has emerged that Washington never notified Seoul it was sending any kind of anthrax sample to the country. Plus, as 7 cases are confirmed, a Korean man suspected of having Middle East Respiratory Syndrome is being held in isolation at a hospital in China after he left voluntary home quarantine this week to travel to the country. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, May 29th here in Seoul. Thanks, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start at the National Assembly, where lawmakers have unanimously approved a bill to reform the nation's deficit-ridden pension system for civil servants. With talks going deep into the early hours of this morning, the breakthrough came when the ruling party agreed to link the reforms with the implementation of a special law related to last year's Seoul ferry sinking. Our National Assembly correspondent Park Geunhye starts us off.
The National Assembly finally passed a pension reform bill aiming to overhaul the nation's debt-ridden pension system for civil servants at its plenary session at around 4 a.m. Friday morning Korea time. The vote, which passed 233-0 with 13 abstentions, came after marathon overnight negotiations between the rival parties. Under the new legislation, public sector workers will now be required to pay higher pension contributions during their working life but receive less when they retire. Since lengthy discussions held earlier in the week, the two parties had actually been in agreement on the pension reforms, both the civil servant pension reforms and plans to strengthen the much larger national pension service. However, it was their differences over the Seoul ferry ordinances that required 2 more days of negotiations. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy had earlier demanded the inclusion of rules to implement the Seoul ferry special law as a package deal with those reforms. They argued that according to the parties' May 10th agreement, the focus of the current extraordinary assembly session was to resolve pension issues and improve Seoul ferry ordinances. Bereaved families of the ferry victims and civic groups have raised concerns about the investigation committee's impartiality. The ruling Senate party had knocked back the condition until Thursday midnight, but the breakthrough came when the ruling party backed down and agreed to accept the request to revise the contentious ferry ordinances. Both sides have agreed to further discuss the matter in June. With the passage of the civil servant pension reform bill, the government will save some $300 billion over the next 70 years. Park Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, on to the latest on the live anthrax sample that was accidentally shipped to an American airbase here in Korea. And US forces are known to have not notified Seoul that it was sending an anthrax sample to the country because they thought the samples were dead or inactive. A US Army Chief of Staff said on Thursday that he's confident that the accidental shipment of live anthrax to labs in 9 US states and South Korea did not endanger any lives, saying that he was 99.9% confident that no one was in danger. The statement comes as the Pentagon said on Wednesday that live anthrax was sent to these 9 US states and the Osan Air Force Base south of Seoul. A Pentagon official stressed that all the samples have since been destroyed in ordnance with appropriate protocols. The leaders of Korea and Uzbekistan held talks in Seoul on Thursday in their second meeting in less than 1 year. They agreed to boost cooperation in various fields like energy and construction. Our Chae-sun reports.
Uzbekistan, rich in natural resources and home to 30 million people, has one of the fastest growing economies in Central Asia. The Uzbek economy expanded by more than 8% last year, and the government there plans to invest $55 billion into infrastructure development, including road and airport construction over the next 5 years. In recent years, Korean companies have won more than a dozen of Uzbekistan's project orders worth nearly $7 billion, and now they're vying for more. During their meeting Thursday, President Park Geunhye and visiting Uzbek President Islam Karimov discussed increasing joint ventures. The two countries signed a $4.5 billion deal to work together on a plant that produces olefin, a material often used in construction from methanol in natural gas. President Park also requested Tashkent's support for Korean participation in its solar energy plant construction, as the two countries are currently working together in this field. The two countries will also lay the groundwork for a bilateral trade deal, as Uzbekistan is Korea's biggest trading partner in Central Asia. Seoul and Tashkent also inked deals to expand cooperation in healthcare and ICT. In international matters, the Uzbek leader reaffirmed his support for President Park's trust-building process with North Korea, her peace initiative in Northeast Asia, and the Eurasia initiative for connecting energy and logistics infrastructure through the continents. Chae-sun, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geunhye also met with a delegation from a US Congressional Committee on Thursday, where she reaffirmed Korea's strong alliance with the United States. The 9-member group from the US said it supported Seoul's efforts for a peaceful reunification on the Korean Peninsula and President Park's upcoming trip to Washington. That is coming next month. The president said the foundation for stronger ties were laid after the two countries had earlier reached an agreement on atomic energy, military cost sharing and the transfer of wartime operational control from the US to South Korea. However, there were no discussions on the possible deployment to South Korea of the US missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD. The committee did say, though, that THAAD would be mutually beneficial as it would protect South Koreans and American forces stationed here from North Korea's missile and nuclear threats. The chief nuclear envoys from South Korea and the US held talks in Beijing on Thursday with their Chinese counterpart to seek ways to resume the long-stalled six-party talks on North Korea's nuclear weapons program. South Korea's envoy Hwang Jung-guk and his American counterpart Sung Kim held separate talks with Chinese chief nuclear envoy Woo Da-wei to demand Beijing play a constructive role in pressuring the North to give up its nuclear ambitions. Now, on the same day, officials from 5 countries involved in the six-party nuclear talks held an informal meeting in Tokyo. North Korea declined to send any representatives there, however. During these so-called Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue talks, the officials are known to have shared views on a broad range of issues related to Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development and how to deal with the issue. And now a somewhat promising update on Japan's bid to list wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. That's because the country may be willing to discuss possible compromises to resolve tensions with its Asian neighbours. That's what the Japanese chief delegate told his Korean counterpart, according to an official at Seoul's foreign ministry on Thursday. The two sides met last week in Tokyo, as you can see there, this as part of Korea's attempt to stop Japan's UNESCO bid on the grounds that nearly 60,000 Koreans were forced to work at several of the facilities during World War II. Japan had initially refuted Korea's opposition, saying politics should not affect the country's application. Back here in Korea, and health authorities have confirmed 2 more cases of the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome in Korea. This brings the total number to 7 now, and this is the biggest concentration, in fact, of patients outside of the Middle East region. And as Han-dan explains, there might be a new cause for alarm as a suspected MERS patient recently boarded a plane to China.
The two latest patients diagnosed with the MERS virus both had close contact with the first patient. One, a 71-year-old man who shared the same hospital room as the first patient, and the other, a 28-year-old health professional who treated him. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the two were under home quarantine since the confirmation of the first case last Wednesday, but developed symptoms overnight. However, the CDC is now facing a bigger problem. To the shock of many, authorities have confirmed that a suspected MERS patient left home quarantine and boarded a plane to China on Tuesday. He's the son of the third patient, who was also secluded at home. According to Yonhap News Agency, he is in isolation at a large hospital in China undergoing diagnostic tests. The CDC is being grilled over its incompetence, especially for the loose monitoring of dozens of suspected patients. Some medical experts say the situation may get much worse.
I expect several more MERS cases within the next few days, as many people were exposed to the first patient not knowing he carried the virus. Also, if some people were infected from the suspected patient who flew to China, there will be many more tertiary infections, and in that case, we're facing quite a serious situation.
The center has isolated the suspected patient's wife, as well as 10 other medical staff who may have had contact with him. Officials are also going through the plane's passenger list. There are now 73 people in home quarantine. Han-dan, Arirang News.
Now, as you'd expect, really, these additional MERS cases have added to public fear here in Korea, especially since most Koreans know next to nothing about this deadly disease that only recently arrived on the country's shores. Our Gwon-soa gives us some background on this growing health concern.
Korea now has the highest number of MERS infections outside the Middle East. The virus first appeared in Saudi Arabia 3 years ago and has since been reported in 22 other countries. More than 1,150 people have been infected, with over 470 related deaths. It has a fatality rate of 40.7%. The virus is a member of the coronavirus family, which includes common colds as well as the deadly SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome. In 2013, the World Health Organization called MERS a, quote, threat to the entire world. With the impacts of the latest Ebola outbreak still lingering, fear is growing in Korea that MERS may spread. Some health officials say there is no need to raise alarm just yet, since the virus is not considered very contagious. Of the total cases reported worldwide, only 2.5% were from non-Middle Eastern countries. However, public criticism over the slow handling of these latest cases has pressured authorities to take extra caution to prevent future spread of the virus. MERS has an incubation period of 2 to 14 days. The most common symptoms are high fever, coughing, and shortness of breath. According to the CDC, the best way to prevent catching the virus is to wash your hands regularly and avoid personal contact with infected or sick people, among other basic measures. There is no clear answer yet as to how MERS is being transmitted, and no vaccine to prevent an infection. Only treatment to alleviate the symptoms. Gwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean government is attempting to change the country's highly competitive education culture and its focus on getting good grades into something that fosters more creativity and individuality. And one of the policies linked to this drive is a free year program for high school students. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
This is no ordinary school entrance ceremony. Enrolling students take center stage, presenting their hopes, dreams, and expectations for the new year, looking for a fresh educational experience.
Korea's education system is notorious for its grueling study hours and expensive private tutoring. To remedy those issues, the government is trying to foster a learning culture, like this free-year program designed to help students explore career options at an early age.
Named after the classic Greek novel, the Odyssey School aims to give students more breathing room and space to nurture their personal talents and interests, which could help launch lifetime careers. For 1 year, students are exempt from midterms and finals, so they can focus on various extracurricular programs and vocational experiences.
I want to be a singer when I grow up. I'm looking forward to the program's mentoring sessions with professional singers and college students.
40 students were selected to participate in the pilot program. The Education Ministry plans to expand the program to all high school freshmen in the coming years.
At first, I was worried that my son wouldn't be able to compete academically or get high scores once he returns to school after the program. But meeting the teachers here and seeing the curriculum, I'm not concerned anymore.
The current system makes students ignore their unique qualities. If the free-year program works, I think it could be a model case for other education systems in Asia that have similar problems.
A year from now, these students will return to school and fall back into their regular studies. Hopefully by then they'll have more confidence and a better idea of where they're headed and how to get there. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we're following on this Friday morning in Seoul. Have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.